Welcome, everyone. So this is our third or fourth, actually, I can't remember, third or fourth Purpose First webinar.
I think it might be the fifth.
Are you serious?
Yeah, it's been a while. We've been doing a lot of them.
Jason, where have you been?
I feel like it's the fifth.
Thanks, Juliana. Thanks for calling me out. Way to kick off. So welcome, everyone. I think we have 20 or so participants ultimately joining. So thank you to all those virtually that are joining us. And thanks to all the folks that work behind the scenes to make these things happen. But so today's an interesting one for us and specifically for me, for that matter. Today we welcome my dear friend and colleague, and I think in that sequence, friend first. Jess joins. Jess is it's kind of a surreal moment to have a webinar with you. I got to be honest.
I know, it's weird.
It's a strange moment, but I have to say I couldn't be more excited about this. You know, we've known each other for a significant amount of time, and you know, this to me is like a coming out party, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, and for all of those, all the other people here, there's a little background on Jess. So I actually met Jess a long time ago, but at the time she was just coming out of an interesting path, and I'm going to let her talk a little bit later about that. But an interesting path of sort of reaching what many would regard as a pinnacle in the business world, but not just in the business world, specifically in the marketing space, and made a fairly radical, and in hindsight, probably not necessarily radical, but probably a necessary and logical and heartfelt move to take a different route. And you know, I've always found that to be super inspirational, Justin, and I think that's where we first have connected and have become close since. And I think you know, when we were concepting up this webinar series, you were one of the first people we thought of bringing in for so many different reasons. But you know, mostly about the work that you're doing to help others, as you know, and have been a part of the pivot in our business to be almost exclusively about purpose. You know, it's sort of where it syncs up to what you've been doing, more on an individual level. But so anyway, I'm excited for today. So welcome. I'll let you introduce yourself, but first, we also have Juliana, who is one of our creative leads in our organization, who's joining us today, which I'm also super you. Sorry, not to just Jess.
No, it's great. Yeah, do your thing.
But she is our guest. She is our guest. Juliana has been a part of our organization. Well, you've been here over a year now at this point, right?
Coming on about 9 months, just under a year. It'll be a year in August.
There you go.
But with COVID and everything, we were just saying,
what an interesting time.
It's a figment of imagination.
It makes you effectively here, I think, for 7 years.
Had the gray hair.
So welcome. I'm excited for you to join. You know, we've had for those of you out there, we've had our prep for this behind the scenes, and it was really nice to see Juliana, who's someone I super respect that I work with on a daily basis, and is one of the best creatives I've worked with. Sort of melding with a close friend of mine. It's like worlds colliding behind the scenes. So I'm excited for both of you to join us, and you guys are going to take the lead on it. But so Juliana, if you wouldn't mind doing a quick intro, and then Jess, if you want to pick it up from there too, that'd be great.
Yeah, totally. So thank you, Jason, for kind of kicking this off. You know, super excited to be here. So obviously, Jessica, who are you? Tell us about you, you know, kind of your path, kind of how did you come to be here with us today, kind of in this moment?
Yeah. Well, first, Jason and Juliana, I'm so honored to be here with you both today. And I love what you're doing. I think what you're putting out there and the discussions that you're putting out, you know, externally into everyone right now are so important. So congratulations on that, and really job well done. Since it's a 1 hour webinar, right? So to tell my whole story and journey could take about that. So I'll try to give some of the highlights. But it's interesting. My path has become more revealed to me, having that 20/20 hindsight, you know, perspective now. And my truth is that I was never happy in the corporate world. At the height of my career as a global CMO of a major company, but I wasn't surely happy. And that started even in my 20s when I first worked at one of the top 10 ad agencies. And I had panic attacks. And now I understand what those were about, because the panic attack, like what was going on in my head at the time was, I can't believe this is life. Like, how did we all agree to this? We're just going to get on this little train, go to this office, be captive here all day, do that and die. And my journey following that was a reflection of that. Because I had like a story in my head, I thought, and I had like spent all this money in college studying advertising and marketing. I thought like, this is what I have to do. This is what I have to do. And I kept trying and trying and trying. But ultimately, I got to the realization and the honesty that that didn't work for me. I didn't have the vocabulary around the words purpose, or I call it soul purpose at the time. But I knew that I really wanted to get paid to be happy. And I felt like I was getting paid to suffer. That was my experience. And so I made like 2 leaps, and then I'll just talk briefly about what I'm doing today. In 2011, I was laid off from a big job. Despite what everyone told me to do with that time, I went and traveled for a year. And I was 36 at the time, so it was kind of a weird thing to do. It wasn't like a gap year. And I had a lot of realizations at that time. And it was really when I strongly started to believe that there was a better destiny for me. And then cut to 2015 is when I really leaped and stepped into the work I'm doing now. I was the global CMO of Rakuten at the time, and decided that I was going to journey into, that original belief of finding work that would make me happy. So today I lead a retreat for C-level women called the Woman's Purpose Retreat that is all about helping them tap their whole self and authentic leadership and connect to their purpose and leadership. I coach women, and I have written a book called Dare to Believe, and I have an online show that also focuses on soul purpose and the importance of finding meaning in your life.
That's awesome. And I know that there's definitely some days, that I definitely empathize with that. It's kind of the 9 to 5, the grind, and you're there and you're just like, I love 29, love my job. Don't get me wrong.
Be careful what you say, Juliana. This is being recorded.
But we all feel that way, right? I know that's true. But we all feel that way, right? Now, but it's to, to be able to recognize that and to kind of take that leap is so insightful, and like you said, 36 is not like, that's nothing these days, right? It's like, you can have that gap year at 36, and that's something that, is inspiring. So, as at 29, we help brands define their purpose or their why. And we see it all the time, there's a need for a brand, or, even these days, an organization or a community or movement to have real meaning in its existence. And this is such an integral period in our lives, with everything that's going on. It's like so important now more than ever. And for you, it's like you help, your expertise is helping individuals find their own purpose and their own why. And so what do you think is that relationship between a brand, organization, community's purpose and an individual's purpose? Yeah.
Well, first thing I'll say is I think there's a lot of work to be done. And there's a lot more synergy that needs to be had. When I go in and speak to a company or do a workshop with a company, the conversations leading up to that are like, hey, I'm so glad that, you've decided that the company needs to stand for a higher purpose. Yes, that's important in today's marketing. That's important for consumers. But the mistake is, okay, hey, we've created our new purpose statement. We've rolled it out. And even if they've touched some of the key aspects of the value change against, culture or product or other things where you've got to live it, you can't just tell it. There seems to be a disconnect that, hey, we've rolled out our purpose. We're assuming everyone's going to feel connected to that purpose, right? And so part of the process too, and it's a scary one, because the fear is, oh my God, are we going to lose employees? Are they going to uncover and wake up to their purpose and realize it's not here and move on? But I would say that I think that's a good thing. Right? Because the only way that we're going to truly live in a purpose-centric world where everyone feels connected to a calling, which is what I think the real opportunity is if we let and support from a corporate environment those people getting to honor and identify what their unique purpose is. And the fact is, most people haven't thought about it. I didn't think about it until I was about 40 years old, right? Like in a deep, profound way. So I think that there's work to be done, and that companies who are supporting, individual exploration of purpose, meaning what drives them, and then ultimately, connecting that into their purpose and maybe how they can best serve now against that purpose, is really critical work that needs to be done, because it's not a one size fits all. And you just can't assume that as a company that, you've gotten excited about your purpose and then perhaps changed it, that everyone else in the company feels connected to that. And your employees are your evangelists of your purpose. So it's really like important. There's a connection and an authentic integration there.
Yeah. No, and I love that there's this, and first of all, I have to apologize. I think I was booted out for a second, so I missed a little bit of what you said earlier. But I mean, I think that this idea of this integration and the fact that you can't have one without the other absolutely makes sense. You can't just be told, all right, this is what we believe in. Good. All right. See you later. Go have fun. It's like, you really do have to kind of feel it inside as an individual and to be able to kind of express that. And so, I mean, given that these things are totally intertwined, and it seems like even for happiness, you really can't have one without the other. Let's talk about kind of like helping leaders kind of define that purpose. Like you expect the organizations, will kind of like see this on a larger level, but can you walk us through this process of kind of helping leaders and organizations kind of find their purpose?
Yeah, well, I don't help organizations find their purpose, just to clarify. Sure. But yeah. I mean, I definitely work with individuals. My approach is probably, though it's becoming more accepted, but would probably feel a little bit radical for a company, because what I do and I help primarily women with is an understanding that, and again, I'm talking about for people that just don't feel connected to a purpose or feel lukewarm about what they're doing, okay? But that purpose isn't something to be figured out. You're not going to think your way into it. There's no kind of magical or equation to solve it. It's really about an uncovering. It's about understanding what you have true resonance for. It's about understanding what your heart truly wants. Most of us don't honor that. And we, more often than not, listen to what I'm going to call the voice of fear in your head that presents itself as the voice of reason, your ego, and we make most of our decisions based upon that. And when we do that, we lead to very small lives. So my process is about bringing that back into balance and harmony, understanding and I call it your heart because I don't have a better word, but like the truth of who you are, what that really wants, like who you uniquely are and what really drives you, what you really feel passion for, what you really feel resonance with. And that's a process. Many times we go through lives, we kind of get a little bit numb. We're like a robot going through the motion. And so I have many people going, I don't have passion about anything. So you kind of have to become like a curious detective about you again and start to understand what's unique to you in terms of what you love and when you're passionate. And from there is where there's a foundation and a starting point. From there is what I found. Yeah. And then we go through a huge process too of rewriting all the negative storylines in your head, all the limiting beliefs we have that have actually, because we're so aligned to them, shape and are reflected in our current reality. So there's an uncovering, there's a dismantling, and then there's a process of trusting and being open and allowing almost yourself to be guided into what that next thing is. So it's an extensive kind of program.
Yeah.
In my book, because I felt I had to, let me back up and say, I spent over a decade trying to figure this out. I did every career assessment. Yeah. I did all the things, and I finally realized, and I went back to a lot of ancient wisdom teachings, and I went that route, and that is where I found my answers. However, I didn't know how I actually applied that into making this happen. So in my book, what I did is I took those teachings and I give it a linear approach, a step-by-step, here's how you take that if you buy into that, and here's what you do with it. And really all of it's in my book. I felt compelled, I don't care if people don't work with me or not. I want to help as many people as possible. But essentially, when you work with me, I take people through that in a more extensive way.
And gosh, I mean, it's like you said, there's, kind of thinking back to kind of some of these ancient practices, it is almost a practice. It's extensive, right? It's something it sounds like you really have to do again and again over a period of time and focus on. It's not just something that you'll, have a good night's rest and then wake up and just be like, but being able to kind of almost exercise that muscle, it seems like. I mean, it's to be able to kind of listen to yourself, I think is takes a lot of discipline. I mean, that's so hard.
And it's what I always say to my clients is, look, it's doing the practice that matters. Like, don't worry if you don't feel successful in the moment. Don't worry. When you practice that consistently over time, there will be one day when it just unravels, unfolds, and you'll be in it. That's kind of how this works. And at the core of that, you know, all the ancient wisdom teachings basically, you know, say the same thing. And it's, you know, you have a lower self. I'll call it your ego self, that voice of fear in your head that presents as the voice of reason. Most of us identify with that as us. Okay. And then you have your higher self. You listen to what that ego self says and you believe it and you take actions based on what it has to say. You'll not be in your purpose. You'll lead a small life. So it's about unraveling that. I mean, that's at the heart of what the program does, but it's also, you know, I'm a former CMO. It's very like action goal oriented. We go through a process of writing your purpose statement. You know, you kind of walk away with your action plan of how you're going to step into the actual living in it if it, you know, doesn't start to happen within the engagement. So it's very accountability oriented. But that's at the heart of the problem. We can't think our way into this. That's the kind of thing that it's hard for a lot of people to grapple with.
Yeah.
Juliana, let me jump in real quick just on that, because I think the framework of the discussion is interesting, right? Because you've got, and I think Juliana hit on this, that you're coming at this with an individualized approach for people to figure out their path and their purpose. And I love the title, by the way, of this, that it's Heart and Hard Decisions. When you talk about ego, and I want to make sure people understand this, when you talk about ego, because I've heard you talk about this before, how much does logic play into the factors of ego?
Well, a lot. And logic's not a bad thing. At all. And I also want to clarify, a lot of times when they hear the word ego, they're thinking egotistical, or, you know, they're thinking these adjectives, like these attributes. And I'm talking really about a part of you that exists in all of us. And again, I always say it's like that voice of fear in your head that presents as the voice of reason. So I'm gonna get to your question in a second, Jason. But that voice is incessant. There's research out there that says we have between 16,000 and 30,000 thoughts a day. 90% of them are negative fear-based thoughts. So coming from our ego, right? And then there's more research that says like only 5% of them even ever happen. So we're kind of insane too. But like that's a whole other thing. But logic is good.
Is that the purpose of this? Is just to say we're all completely nuts?
We're totally nuts. So logic is good. Like I always will tell a lot of my clients this, and not to brag, but to really illustrate a point. Like I'm about analytical thinking. I got a scholarship to Cornell based on my scores on the analytical portion of the GREs. Okay. Like I get it. You know what I'm saying? But it's when that's your primary driver and you're not even like hearing what I'll call like that kind of higher loving part of you, like what its input is, you know? So the way that you want it to flip. You want like your big kind of direction, your big insights to come from there. And then you want this to do what it's meant to do, is like make it happen, you know, is like provide another layer of insight on it. Yeah. But it's not about this having the lead domino. I don't know if that answered your question. You can tell me if it did or not.
No, it does. I'm trying to get what I was trying to strike at with that question is I want to make sure that the audience here understands what you mean, one, by ego, but then I think a lot of people also would construe what you're suggesting is that a voice of reason and logic may actually be the enemy. And I like how you framed it. It's not necessarily, it's a component, and it's and there's real value in utilizing the knowledge that you've acquired. But and I like, you know, I know that you're an analytical person, and hearing sort of data and statistics behind how much of what we do is actually driven by fear. I don't know if we haven't talked about this, but we hosted a webinar, one of the last ones, not last week, before that, was with a group. And the topic was around rare breed, and a lot of that was about different angle, but similar, and that sort of bringing out of you what is really there, as opposed to sort of denying it. And so in doing that, you know, you got to factor all sides, and I think what you're suggesting, you tell me if I'm wrong, is that when you focus on one particular piece, aka ego or logic and fear, you're likely to get one result. as opposed to sort of embracing all of it around.
Yeah, well, let me clarify it too, now that I understand more of what you're asking. If the logic is really coming from a place of fear, then it's your ego, okay? If the logic is just really coming from a whole, I'll call it the heart-centered, like truth, not from a scared part, not really from a place of fear, then that's good. That's okay. Not that one's good or bad, right? But just to have an understanding of awareness of where it's coming from. That's how you can start to distinguish.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
There's, and I'm kind of going rogue a little bit with this, but I mean, are there any kind of like daily exercises, any kind of practices that you would recommend or that you practice yourself in terms of strengthening kind of that hearing a little bit?
Meditation is the key. Meditation's like the primary key. I have kind of like a robust, like I'll call it daily practice, but like if I only do one thing, it'd always be meditation. I'll even like show a good book I have right here. The cover is ripped off because I've read it so much. A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, like the best book about the ego that was ever written. I actually have all my clients read it. That's why I have it here.
But that was very like that. You're ready.
Yeah, it's why it's always here. But meditation is the key thing. That really helps you over time start to observe the ego. Look, the ego's not the enemy. You just want to observe it. You just don't want to be 100% identified with it and think it's you. So the only and I have a lot of my clients like set little calendar invites throughout the day and pause and go, okay, was I just like an ego, or just to have the observation, just to have the awareness? Starting to have awareness of the ego is where all the kind of answers, awakening comes to play.
Jess and Julian, if I may jump in, the thing that strikes me about this discussion, even just thus far automatically, is, first of all, you sat in a position prior to this path in your career. If I take this, because look, we're trying to help people in their careers here, and in organizations. We're a marketing organization, so we're trying to use purpose to elevate the discussion, right? And you sat in an office, in a corner office that almost required ego to be successful at that level. And so I'm thinking about people that we deal with, and organizations that they lead, and how hard it may be to make decisions in a different way that you're suggesting. And maybe this is a segue, and I know Juliana has other talking points, but when we get back to talking about our current environment, and what business leaders are required to do to succeed right now, it just feels like the dynamic is radically changing. And as you're talking through this, I'm also thinking of a close colleague of mine who works at Lululemon, where they've started to actually input some of the practices you're talking about organizationally into their business, where they've got group meditations, they've got mindfulness practices, there are all sorts of things to support a completely different way of thinking. So I guess what I'm getting at is just to acknowledge one, it's you said radical in the beginning of this, but as you're talking, it's like, talk about how individuals can handle if let's just say it is in their heart and they're looking to make a decision based on that. How do they actually do that, given the organization that they sit in that might be resistant to that, or just looking at you got five heads?
Yeah, well, sometimes you got to be in acceptance of the place that you are. You can put your best foot forward and speak what you believe to be the right thing to do, and then you kind of got to let go of the results, unfortunately, sometimes. You're right, Jason, there's been a shift. Look, back in the day, like leadership was like this fear-based, almost like authoritarian kind of like thing, right? Then it switched and you had like more participative forms of leadership, and now you have conscious leadership. And you have like an embrace of qualities that have, historically been attributed to like divine feminine, right? Rather than like divine masculine. Like, so you're absolutely right. Like there is an acceptance of that. There is, being a wholehearted leader, being, a whole self leader, like all of that is more or less accepted. But there are constraints. And by the way, like not all fear is bad. There is that percentage, like some things are warranted. It's just this like addiction to fear, this over propensity to, You know, you can see it a lot in the medical system. Like all decisions are made based on risk and what could go wrong, not on like possibility and right? And so it's just like that shift in thinking. Am I going to focus all my attention on what could go wrong and on the negative, or I'm also going to consider the good? And is that in balance? You know, that's an assessment to look at within yourself first, what you're putting forward. Again, you can't control other people. So it is what it is when you're in that situation, and you got to be okay with that decision you've made for yourself to be there and know that everything you want or believe may or may not happen unless you're the CEO, right? Accept your choice within that. But, you know, I think what you can do is, you know, be a bit of a beacon and help direct the conversations to perhaps shifting where the primary focus is. I'm not saying like be this insane risk taker, right? You know, but it's like, are you in balance with it? Are you in balance with it? And historically, you always find that the companies that I'll call like do innovate or do take risk are the ones that are like more successful, right? But I think also it's not just about company decisions, but in how you're treating people, how you're managing them, what place you're doing that from as well. Again, you can only do you at the end of the day. And, you know, if you focus on that, you know, you may or may not find this place is the right fit for you anymore too, if you're in a change. And there are companies out there that would be, though. There's a lot of change happening.
Yeah. And I love that observation. And, you know, and especially, you know, as a woman that's kind of coming up in an industry that is kind of traditionally been dominated by men, there's, you know, kind of in advertising, and, you know, I used to live in New York, which is even, you know, kind of, I feel like more polarizing. You know, there was always kind of this feeling of like, oh, well, you have to like play that game and you have to like step up and do these things. And it's kind of like, you have to put aside this part of you that, you know, might be considered like, you know, too conscious. You could use your words, you know, and, or too conscientious, I'm sorry. And it's not conscious. Conscious is good. But, you know, being able, and there has been this really clear shift over the last like 10 or so years of this kind of different mindset, not only in certain businesses, but also just in industries that have been traditionally kind of like plagued with kind of an opposite approach. And so it's been really kind of great to hear. And I think this is one thing I was really excited about when Jason first mentioned that we'd be speaking with you. I was like, oh, fantastic. You know, to kind of be able to talk to somebody who's kind of championing a lot of this thinking and being able to provide guidance to others as well, you know, who are kind of trying to figure out their footing and trying to figure out the best way to make decisions and whatnot. And so that's kind of exciting to see kind of both ends, you know. And so, I mean, is there someone, you know, is there kind of like a group of people or a demographic or someone that's you feel like kind of really needs to like hear these messages and kind of really take this practice to kind of the next level?
Yeah, I mean, I think many folks need to hear it. I'll tell you, like one of the mistakes I made, at least for myself, when I first started out doing, you know, when I first started this journey, I was doing more work on purpose in the corporate environment. And because I like woke up to this, I'm like, everyone needs to wake up to this, right? And I learned that my role in this world is not to wake up people that don't want to wake up to stuff I have to offer. Like that's just friction, right? So I would say, yeah, a lot of people need it, but I just don't consider that my business anymore. But I am a source and a resource for those who want it. And that's the difference. You know, I mostly work with women. It really actually wasn't the original intention, but it organically flourished that way. And I own it and I love it. Because, you know, you mentioned something about, you know, I worked in New York City ad agency, and I remember I was running new business at a, you know, big agency. I had, you know, I'm from California. I'd just come from California. And even the style ad in California, I couldn't get any respect or get anything done. And I actually turned into someone like I really didn't like. And it actually made me really sad. And it was another kind of touchstone in this journey. Like, you know, I have to be a bitch and I can't smile to get anything done. I had to take on those, like, what I'll call, not that, you know, men are like that, but like I had to take on more male traits, right? To like succeed. Yep. And that didn't feel organic to me. I think the tides have turned. I think there's still work to do. Yeah. And I think we're actually respecting and honoring more of what, you know, women bring into it. Right. But you know, yeah, there's work to be done. I think, I will say, and let's like look at the positive. I mean, I think there's a lot of like good work just with the rise of like conscious capitalism, right? You know, the rise of B Corps, you know, there is a lot of good work being done. Do more need to hear it? Sure. Do more need to maybe make up to it? Sure. And you know, it'll happen as it's meant to. That's kind of my belief on it.
Oh, that's fantastic. And so actually, thank you, Sarah, for submitting a question. And it's kind of a reminder to everybody, you know, who's listening. We do have opportunity if you want to submit a question. You know, we'll definitely do our best to try to get it answered. But yeah, this first one, Jessica, love all your insights. From your experience, what do people struggle with the most within finding their purpose?
Not being honest with themselves. Sorry, it says what? Yeah, the biggest that is it, hands down. If you're really honest with yourself, you might have to go back to childhood. You might need to like tap into parts of you've buried. But if you're really honest with yourself about what you really want, most people are not. That's the biggest obstacle. And then the second one, which is what happened for me. Yeah, I kind of know like what my dream scenario would be, what I really want, but that's not possible. That's not possible. Yeah. That's stupid. Then all the limiting beliefs, all the oral storylines. That's why like my program, it's uncovering and then dismantling this. Because your limiting beliefs, as long as you're aligned to them, they will be reflected in your reality. That's how it works, you know? So those are the two, being honest with yourself about what you really, really want and then believing it's possible. That's why my book is called Dare to Believe, because like that was my internal mantra. I'm going to believe this kind of life I'm envisioning myself as possible, even though everyone's telling me it's not too, by the way, you know?
Yeah.
That's it. I hope that answers your question, Sarah.
Jess, if I can jump in on that. So it's interesting. On the second part of that, on the dare to believe, and I had a little bit of a front row seat when you first started concepting what all of this would become. And I remember some of your own language during that time period. It was, I don't know if it was limiting, but there was definitely doubt. There was still fear. Is it something, because I think it's sort of on the back of what Sarah's question is, did you sort of build, like, I don't know that anyone shows up and right away, all right, Jess, I got your 2 points here, I'm in. Did you build to where you're at now and sort of embrace it along the way, and it's sort of, you know, a muscle that got built?
Yeah. I mean, look, my journey in it is usually the one I don't recommend to others. And I'll say this too, because people think like, to kind of do what I have now, they've got to do it in the same way. I mean, I left the job and just leaped, not even knowing what I was going to do. But I was like, I didn't understand it would take so long to be truth be told. But I was like, Band-Aid off, go, you know? So yeah, for me, what I learned and through constantly getting off path and having to reorient is that the uncovering and realizing of your soul purpose is by staying in the moment-to-moment resonance of your heart and trusting where it's leading. So at first, as you know, Jason, like I still had stories in my head. I'm like, I got to still do something in the corporate world. I'm a corporate, you know, and I had my whole offering around that, but nothing was working there. Like I had some good traction and it didn't feel good either. Like I wasn't actually enjoying it, but I had an idea in my head. Well, if I can do purpose in corporate, like that'll be good. That's good enough. I was kind of settling. And so that had to like not work for me to like reshift and reconnect to what I really wanted to do. So it's a journey that has been unfolding. You know, it's only like in the last 2 years, I'll say like it really finally unfolded. Of course, it's still changing and growing. I don't know even where it's leading totally. I can't wait to be surprised, you know? But to answer your question, like the whole journey has been one of trying to rise above fear. Fear has shown up for me at every step of the way. You know, I will say it's been really interesting, and I don't mean to jump topics on you, but I was sharing about this with someone recently. The last 2 months, which is the time I should be the most afraid, is the first time in this journey I feel completely like everything's going to be fine and okay. I've had like fear the whole way through this. And so every day it's like a journey for me to not listen to the voice of fear in my head, try to listen to what this is saying and trust in what this is saying more than I do this one. Every day, moment to moment. And if I feel that somewhere on the journey I'm not having resonance, like it doesn't feel good, then I got to go back and reorient and see where the next path leads. Because that's what it's about. It's not the destination. It is, like, to not sound too cheesy and, you know, all that, but it is the journey. It's true. It is the journey.
Yeah. And so thinking about that journey, and we actually just got a question from Jess about kind of the longevity of our internal purpose. And so, I mean, thinking, you know, the way you described it is with your own personal experiences, that it's something that kind of unfolded, and that, you know, you could have had this inkling of purpose and it kind of morphed and it changed, but for the most part, it was kind of relatively, it sounds like linear, you know, but in this case, you know, and especially, you know, as people grow and go through different life stages and have different ideas, you know, purpose might change, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, do you think it's something that kind of is like growing from day one, and, you know, wherever it takes you, it takes you?
Yes, it's not about the what, and I would dare say, this is going to sound so controversial, but it's not about the specific why. The why might evolve, though I think, you know, you need to anchor on the why. What it's really about is like the feeling. Like, it's really about like that resonance, that heart resonance. It's really about the feeling. And to answer your question, Jess, by the way, I love your name. You know, we are complex, like, individuals. We're souls, you know, like, so yes, of course there are multiple things. Your purpose might be to be a mom and to also, you know, have a ethical fashion line. I don't know. Do you know what I mean? It's multiple things, but ultimately your purpose is to live more connected to your heart than you do to fear. I mean, that's what it is at the end of the day. And whatever the expression is of that, right, might evolve over time. You know, back on your childhood thing, you know, my like little secret when I was a kid is I wanted to be an actress, right? And I like never shared that with anyone. That was like my thing. And when my online TV show that I have just like fell, I wasn't seeking that out. It came to me. I was given this offer to do it. I was like, whoa, you know, like, I just keep honoring my resonance. What else is going to come? You know? So yeah, but it, you know, in a temporary experience, you know, if right now you're unhappy, Jess, then you're, you know, the only destination within your current short part of the journey is to take some steps that will lead to you being happy. Like, your purpose is to be excited about what you're doing every day. Your purpose is to feel good about what you're doing every day. It's not to be miserable. It's not to be in survival consciousness. It's not to be in self-induced like suffering. Your destiny is not to suffer. So whatever that looks like for you is like the immediate next steps.
Well, and so kind of piggybacking off that, like, you know, this idea of survival, and my coworkers will confirm that this is something that, you know, I've been kicking around lately and kind of thinking a lot about. You know, obviously the word purpose comes up a lot in our office, but, you know, with Black Lives Matter, with COVID, with, you know, people being furloughed or losing their jobs, you know, and plus, you know, it's always kind of something, but I mean, the last couple of months have really kind of tried us, you know, kind of as a nation. But, you know, there's so much focus, and understandably so, on survival, on kind of fulfilling our basic needs of comfort and having a roof over our head and making sure that we're alive. And, you know, and it's less, I know for me personally, and I'm interested to kind of hear you say how, like, these last couple of months you've been able, and maybe it's because you've been exercising this muscle more than I have, to be honest, but, you know, it's something I've been thinking about. It's like, gosh, like, how to talk about self-actualization and to talk about this kind of higher level of thought is, it's kind of a hard internal battle, because it's like, well, gosh, but like, you know, what about my job? What about, like, you know, my neighbors? What about my family, my health, my wellness, whatever, you know, and it's been kind of an internal point of tension for me, at least. Yeah. And so it's, you know, if you're kind of coming into this new and you know, and this is not something you've been kind of grappling with, like, you know, how would you recommend kind of tackling kind of this idea of finding your purpose, or maybe kind of like reigniting that, or that search, you know, and how can we, you know, what is the opportunity that we have to evolve to a higher consciousness in this, in, you know, as a society? Yeah.
So it's tricky right now, right? The opportunity for limitless potential always exists. What I will say, take what resonates, and if it doesn't resonate, I don't pretend to know your journey. What I believe in and what I'm tuning into is, despite outward appearances, that this is the time for expansion. The realizations you're having about your life, the way that you're seeing things more clearly, and perhaps the way that you didn't before, is happening for a reason. You do not have these realizations. You do not have these ahas to just sit there and go, oh, well, I'm going to do nothing about it. And by the way, you don't have these realizations or these shifts in perceptions about your life that there's no possible path towards realizing. Doesn't work like that. That I can promise you. So if you buy what I'm saying, and if you don't, that's fine. Just leave it where it is. It's all good. I don't pretend to know your journey. There is an opportunity for you to take this moment, in any moment, by the way, and be honest about the realizations you're having and start to understand what the implications are of them. I realize I don't want to be in office 5 days a week. Okay, so what's the implication of that? Do you really want a scenario where you work at home 2 days a week so you can be with your kids? Yes, if I do that, I'll be making happy. I'm just making this up. And then what you start to do is just hold a new vision for your life, and just with your power of belief, with your power of imagination, what I would suggest to you is just start to possibly believe it's possible, whatever that thing is. And then open yourself up to allow yourself to be guided. So you might have moments of inspiration, or a friend might suggest something to you that ties to a baby step action you could take. Be willing to take baby steps towards that vision as you are guided. Baby step, baby step, baby steps. Just be willing. Be open to receiving guidance. Be open to your intuition being stronger and giving you some nudges of something you could do. Be willing to take the baby steps. And obviously, try to just as best you can, trust and believe it's possible, and follow that baby step journey and see where it may or may not lead. But back on this, I really believe the higher purpose of this moment is to really show collectively a lot that's more than problematic. I don't have the words for it, right? But that's not working. And I'm not going to get into much of that, but individually, we're each being shown things about our lives, and all those things we're being shown are about possibility. They're all about possibility, but you have to be willing to take steps forward to it. You have to believe it to be so.
So Jess, there's gravity in the word. I love everything you just said. There's real gravity in the last thing you just said, though. You're talking about possibility. And then what Juliana's getting at here, I don't want to super Juliana, but how I'm interpreting is talking about a world around us right now that I think many, I'm not one that really looks at polls, but I would guess many feel is somewhat out of control. Right, there's almost biblical things happening right now. We got killer hornets coming at us. So it's I think it's hard for people to understand or contemplate swinging that around to there's possibility. And I guess I say that, but there's also many entrepreneurs now. Let's take it back to the business world. Many entrepreneurs see a moment like this and see opportunity. Right, we both went through 2008, and there was a significant amount of innovation that came out of that big downturn. So maybe is that kind of what you're getting at with this?
Well,
no, a little bit. I would say if you might need to be, what you believe, the stories in your head will be reflected to you in your reality. That's your superpower. So if you might also need to be really in it right now to heal something within you. So that's okay. I'm not here to tell you to not be scared about this moment, to not feel it's out of control. I'm here to guide you to do what's best for you, whatever that might look like. I'm here to suggest, though, that you're more powerful than you think. And if there is something really showing up for you that you just know, this job is not serving me anymore, I really want this, you are not having that shift in perspective because there's no path of possibility towards that. That I know for sure. And so I'm not saying disconnect from the world, not believe or buy into what's happening. I think we're going through a profound healing moment of necessary change. Healing, bringing all the shadow, bringing all the darkness up into the light is always the first step to making collective change, and that might be what you're referring to with 28. So yes, on a collective level, I think that that's what's happening. What I'm saying is that you shape your own destiny. Don't negate that power. Even in troubled times, even in times, if there is something that is just this pure heart desire, I promise you that there's a path there, but you've got to be really willing to take some steps towards it. Now, if that doesn't feel right to you, If it feels right to you to play it safe right now, and that's not a bad thing by any means, like then do that. I'm not making an argument for one or the other. I'm simply saying if you're feeling some friction within you around that, and these words resonate with you, then this is your validation to what you've been feeling.
Makes sense. Okay.
I think that we've talked a lot about kind of like being able to pursue and kind of, or, as you said, kind of reveal our purposes. And I think that I know for me personally, I'm like, there's a lot of thinking. I'm like kicking around. I'm like, I gotta like spend more time thinking about this. I gotta meditate more. And I'm curious because there's a lot, and especially given the times that we are in, there's a lot of fear that is going to be projected on to us and to anyone, it's outside fear. Right. And, there's moments of panic and, friends, neighbors, my mom, whoever is like going to be like, oh my God, what's going on? And it's, being able to kind of respond to that or kind of react to that in a kind of controlled way is something that it's really kind of hard to kind of fight that off, and kind of to listen to it, but to kind of embrace it. I mean, is there, when you were surrounded kind of increasingly about this outside fear, how do you kind of tackle this? Like, how do you kind of like wake up in the morning?
Such a good question.
Kind of, like, really good coffee? Like, is this like...
No, remember your power and choice, Juliana.
Yeah.
You have the ability to choose every thought you have. You have the ability to choose every emotion, every feeling you have. When we get a little unconscious, we negate this choice and the default is fear. You have a choice to engage with fear. You have a choice to buy into fear. This is all your choice, And so it's owning your own empowerment and your authentic ability to choose where you're putting your focus. I'm not saying don't stay informed, but do you want to sit in front of the news 3 hours a day? Is that the best choice for you right now? Are you choosing to absorb fear? So it's really at the core. It's remembering we forget, but you do have the power to choose your thoughts, your feelings, your emotions, your reactions. What happens is we feel like our thoughts are just happening to us. We feel like our emotions, and that's because we're not owning our power to choose. So if you wake up every day and say, I'm owning my power to choose my thoughts, all of it today, you might like drop it 5 minutes later, but at least intend every day to choose because that is within your power.
I think I need to write like a Post-it note and put it on my mirror.
I have my clients do that all the time. I get to choose my thoughts. I get to choose what I engage with. But we do forget. And then, human beings in general, like the default state, like we're in a perpetual state. I was in it forever, of what I call victim consciousness, in that we believe the world is something happening to us that we're trying to survive, that we have no part in the creation of our own reality, our own happiness. So when you surrender that choice, then it's going to feel a lot like that.
Yeah. Well, and so, it's curious because, talking about, of course, there's choices, that they're easier to control and to kind of respond to and to kind of, fight off or whatever, and then there's ones, kind of thinking about this idea of the mundane with like a 9 to 5, right? And there is kind of this repetition and whatnot. And I can imagine that, like I feel very personally fortunate that I'm lucky to be able to do something that I love doing. And that, I do feel like is a big part of my passion and, maybe my purpose, and but there's still days, right? That like you come into the office and, sorry, 29, but like, those days you come into the office and you're just like, like, oh my God, and it just tries you, right? And it does, there's days that are more exciting than others. And there's days that are, sometimes a little wah, and it's just things aren't as exciting. And, how, like, whenever we're kind of, there's sometimes like, there's that mundanity is a part of kind of pursuing the purpose. There's kind of this, how do you kind of know, like, whenever you kind of start feeling like, is it just like, is there like a set number of days in a row where you're like, you know what, I'm tired. Or, is it, there's a hard work and you have to buckle down. You have to be analytical, you have to be logical, you have to like, work hard, dig in, get your hands dirty and make it happen. And there's some days I feel a little more purposeful than others.
Yeah. So one thing I want to say, analytical and logical is not a bad thing, only when it's totally tied to fear, so I want to make sure I'm not implying that. But look, I'm not saying that every day is like a bed of roses and utopia.
Right.
What I'm saying though, hopefully more days than not though are, if you're consistently in misery or lukewarm happiness, lukewarm, I like this, then there is something better for you, because that's not your highest potential. There is way more possible for you. But yeah, look, I'm not like sitting here jumping up and down when I do my books, right? But I will say, again, this comes back to power of choice.
Yeah.
If you're having a crappy day and you're not liking how it's feeling and you're not liking the task at hand, what you can do in terms of your ability to choose your mood, your happiness, all of that is anchored to the highest purpose behind that. So like if I'm doing like my books, I'm like, oh, I'm so grateful I have clients right now. Like, you know, I'll tie it back to like the purpose at hand. Yeah. You know?
So I need Post-it notes in my own personal bathroom and in the office.
Totally.
Essentially is what.
Totally. Right? But it's like reconnect to the joy that is behind that, feeling that if you're not okay with being in that mood, you might just decide like some days are like this. That's, again, it's your choice.
Sure. Yeah. No, I love that. Well, I know that we're coming into the last, few minutes of this wonderful conversation with Jessica. If there's any additional questions, feel free to kind of slide them in, kind of under the door. Jason, is there anything else that feel like we, or Jessica too, if there's anything else that you feel like we should have covered and we didn't?
Well, let me, Justin, I'll throw it over to you because I think it'd be good for you to have the closing thoughts here. But I just for everyone, I happen to be taking notes all the time. I'm sitting here, so I'm looking down, not awkwardly, but trying to make sure I capture a lot of this, even though it's being recorded. But I think it'd be good for everyone to hear some of the key things that you said, and these are some things I captured. But in terms of the how, well, certainly the logic and ego part, which I think is really critical for people to recognize. That their inherent ties to fear, and that seems to be a big theme. Not let that take over, and I think you were very clear in saying that being analytical and logical is not necessarily bad, but it is when you tie it to negative thought tracks.
When it's perpetually tied to fear,
yeah, and I think the other part that was really good is when you got into the how of it, that it started with being open to guidance. Who knows? Maybe this webinar was with a moment for someone today, being open to guidance. But you seem to suggest listening to the tea leaves is actually a really good thing.
Yeah.
But then, sort of maybe they're inherently tied together too, which is if you're open to guidance, you're likely, I guess, at that point being open with yourself. And so the idea of starting with honesty and then not limiting your beliefs and believing that you can change. And not just that you can change, but you're in control of your own destiny is I think really powerful words for people to hear, because I do think that people just get bogged down. They're stuck in the mud, and so it was. I don't know. I just took from it a very hopeful thought process.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And the one thing I wanted to say is, because of this moment, I do want to talk about fear. There is a very, I feel, purposeful fear detox happening. So it is not bad. I want to be clear to everyone. If you're feeling fear in this moment, like that is kind of the purpose of the moment, because fear is meant to help you heal as well. What I often teach, and I want to distinguish the difference, and then I want to tell you what you can do with fear right now, is the only, I don't want to call it mistake, but the only way that we don't step in the highest potential of our lives is when we engage with fear as truth rather than as our teacher. Fear is always reflecting to us something within us that needs to be healed, always. So whatever fears are coming up with you right now, be willing to feel them. Fear does want to have a voice, like acknowledge it. Tell someone you're afraid about this, but then be willing to look and do the deeper healing work. Be willing to go down layers and go, what is this really about? Oh, this is my fear of scarcity. This is my fear of that I'm not enough. This is my fear of death. Whatever it is, be willing to really look at that. Let yourself fully feel it and be willing to ever surrender whatever that deepest layer down fear is that's there. Don't try to avoid it. What you resist persists. So to do the work of this moment, it is about being like right face to face with your fears, but not in a, I believe you and I'm moving on. And I'm going to just pretend right now you're not true, but I'm going to instead ask the question, what is this showing me that needs to be healed within me? And being willing to do that deeper work. That is how you will shift your consciousness ultimately. That is the crux of it, especially right now.
I love that.
That was a great answer.
Do you, and just kind of one last question in from Jess.
Yeah.
So any other recommendations for books or resources on this topic? Just, in addition to, Dare to Believe.
Wow. Which I also have.
Wow, you've asked.
That I did put here for this. But no, I mean, I would say start, and again, like I've read this thing so much, the cover's up, but A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle, that is the book of all books. Like that is what I'd recommend more than anything. If you want to then go beyond that, like I love Seed of the Soul by Gary Zukav as well. But that is really like A New Earth. Oprah did a podcast on every single chapter in it too, by the way. It's such a book. It's one of those that it will take you a bit to read, and not because the writing's complicated, but you're like, oh my God, what? Like it's such a shift in your perspective that you'll be like rereading pages. So spend your time with that one. I mean, I've read it. I keep it on my nightstand. Like I've been reading it for 10 years, like off and on all the time.
Oh, that's great.
Awesome.
Well, Jessica, this has been really fantastic, really inspiring. Thank you so much for kind of taking the time to kind of chat with us today. I know that like I have a lot of thinking to do and a lot of like mulling over. And so thank you so much, just especially given, the world that we're in right now, being able to kind of hunker down and kind of turn inward and to kind of, really focus on the stuff that's going to keep us going, in a really kind of positive way is really, I think kind of, I'm so glad that, people showed up and, hopefully we'll, to echo Jason's point, we'll kind of have something to take away from this. And I love how empowering it is too. It's not like we have to sit around and like wait for like enlightenment or something, it's like, it's there and ours for the taking, and it's totally, in our control. And so, thank you again. This was really,
thank you.
It's been fantastic.
It's been an honor to be with you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess.
And so we do have another webinar. We're taking a break next week. I think the team is much deserved. We're taking a break next week, and we have another webinar on June 26th with Natalie Nixon, who is a brilliant creative strategist and old friends of 29 and some of our leadership here. She has a new book coming out. And so we're definitely going to, excited to be kind of talking to her about that. And, after, give us about 24 hours or so, we'll have a recording of our conversation here with Jessica today up on our website, 2920nine.com/webinars. And you'll be able to kind of check it out and listen to this again and again and, share it with your friends and whatnot. So thank you again for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone that showed up too. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes. All right. We'll talk soon. Don't be a stranger.
Bye.